The great hall of Centro's station hummed with the quiet energy of 12 different life forms breathing, clicking, and whispering in their native tongues. Carved from a single massive crystal that had once been the core of a dead planet, the chamber sparkled with light from 3 different suns. Today marked another routine quarterly meeting, where the ruling species of the galaxy would discuss trade routes, territorial disputes, and the endless paperwork of managing lesser civilizations. Ambassador Thane adjusted his ceremonial robes and tried to hide his irritation. The reptilian hegemony had more important matters to attend to than listening to reports about primitive worlds. His species had conquered 17 star systems through careful planning and overwhelming force. They understood power, respect, and the natural order that kept the galaxy stable. The crystal podium in the center of the hall began to glow, signaling the start of formal proceedings. High Counselor Marin materialized as a shimmering figure of living crystal, his voice echoing through the chamber like wind through mountain caves. We gather today to review the quarterly reports from our observation teams. Each species will present findings on potentially dangerous developments in their assigned sectors. One by one, the representatives gave their reports. The avian delegate, Kree, spoke of 3 civilizations that had destroyed themselves with chemical weapons. The Aquatic Union reported 2 species that had polluted their own worlds beyond recovery. The Mechanical Collective noted 4 civilizations that had built artificial intelligence systems that subsequently eliminated their creators. It was always the same story. Primitive species would achieve basic technology, grow too quickly, make terrible mistakes, and disappear from the galaxy. The Council had witnessed this pattern for thousands of years. It was as predictable as star formation and twice as boring. Then Dr. Vale approached the podium, and the mood in the chamber shifted. The elderly scientist had spent most of his career studying primitive worlds, and his reports were always unnecessarily detailed and dramatically presented. He was tolerated, because his research was thorough, but most council members considered him overly emotional about species that would inevitably destroy themselves. Honored counselors, Vale began, his voice carrying an urgency that made several representatives look up from their personal devices. I must speak to you about a species that defies our standard models of primitive development. Thane sighed audibly. Here we go again, he thought. Vale activated a holographic display showing a blue-green world orbiting a yellow star. This is the 3rd planet in the Sol system. Its dominant species calls itself human. In the past 10,000 of their years, they have progressed from using simple stone tools to achieving nuclear fission, spaceflight, and quantum computing. Kree ruffled her feathers dismissively. Another flash species. They always burn bright and fast before collapsing. No, Vale said firmly, his voice growing stronger. That's exactly what makes them different. Every other species we've observed hits a technological wall and either stagnates or destroys itself. Humans keep accelerating. When they discovered fire, they used it to cook food, forge metals, and power engines. When they split the atom, they used it for power generation, medical treatments, and yes, weapons. But the weapons led to a global treaty system that has prevented major wars for over half a century. High Counselor Marin's crystalline form pulsed with mild interest. Their war prevention methods intrigue us. Explain. They created something called mutually assured destruction. The knowledge that any major conflict would end all life on their planet forced them to develop diplomatic solutions. Instead of using their most powerful weapons, they began competing in space exploration, technological development, and economic systems. Their destructive capability created unprecedented cooperation. Thane stood up abruptly, his scaled features twisted with contempt. Dr. Vale, with respect, you're describing every aggressive species we've ever encountered. They all claim to be peaceful when they're weak. The moment they gain real power, they show their true nature. These humans will be no different. But they are different, Vale insisted, bringing up more holographic displays. Look at their response to natural disasters. When earthquakes destroy cities, neighboring nations send aid within hours. When diseases threaten population centers, their scientists share research freely across political boundaries. When they detected an asteroid that could impact their planet, every nation contributed resources to develop deflection technology. The chamber fell quiet. Several representatives exchanged glances. Most primitive species became more isolated and territorial as they faced existential threats. Cooperation in the face of extinction was unusual. Vale continued, his excitement growing. Their entire evolutionary history shows this pattern. They survived ice ages by sharing fire and food. They survived predators by forming hunting groups. They survived plagues by developing medicine and sharing it freely. Every challenge makes them more cooperative, not less. Irrelevant, Thane declared. When they encounter a superior force, they will either submit or attempt to fight. If they submit, they join the galaxy as a minor species under our guidance. If they fight, we eliminate them. The pattern has held for millennia. Dr. Vale turned to face Thane directly. Ambassador, you're making a critical error in judgment. Humans don't just cooperate within their own species. They form emotional bonds with other life forms. They keep other species as companions, even predators that serve no practical purpose. They preserve endangered species at great cost to themselves. They've sent exploration vessels to other star systems not to claim territory, but to search for signs of other intelligent life. Because they're lonely primitives who don't understand how dangerous the galaxy really is, Kree interjected. First contact with a superior species always results in either worship or aggression. Their naive curiosity will disappear the moment they realize they're not the dominant life form in the universe. Vale shook his head vigorously. You're not listening. Humans have been dealing with superior forces their entire evolutionary history. They survived by adapting, learning, and turning disadvantages into advantages. When they encountered horses, they learned to ride them. When they encountered wolves, they domesticated them. When they encountered diseases, they developed immunity. They don't just adapt to challenges, they weaponize everything they learn. The chamber erupted in laughter. High Counselor Marin raised a crystalline hand for silence. Dr. Vale, your passion for your research subjects is admirable, but you're anthropomorphizing primitive behavior. What you describe as adaptation, we see as desperation. What you call cooperation, we recognize as pack hunting. These humans are clever predators, nothing more. They've developed faster-than-light communication theory, Vale said quietly. The laughter stopped. Impossible, Thane declared. No species achieves FTL communication before FTL travel. It violates the natural progression of technological development. Vale nodded grimly. Exactly. They're developing theories that should be impossible for their level of civilization. Their mathematicians have published papers on dimensional folding, quantum entanglement communication, and something they call artificial wormhole generation. They don't have the technology to test these theories yet, but the mathematics is sound. High Counselor Marin's form began to flicker with what other species recognized as deep thought. How long until they develop practical applications? Based on their rate of advancement, perhaps 50 to 100 years. But that assumes linear progression. Humans don't progress linearly. They have breakthrough moments where decades of advancement happen in months. They call it a paradigm shift. The council chamber fell silent. Every representative understood the implications. A species that could develop FTL communication could potentially intercept council communications, track fleet movements, and coordinate defensive actions across multiple star systems simultaneously. Thane broke the silence. Then we eliminate them now, before they become a threat. No, said High Counselor Marin. We watch and wait. If they prove dangerous, we deal with them then. If they follow standard primitive patterns, they'll destroy themselves and save us the effort. Dr. Vale stepped forward one final time. Counselors, I beg you to reconsider. Humans are not a standard primitive species. They are the first tool-using, space-faring, cooperation-based species we've encountered. They represent something genuinely new in the galaxy. Contact them as equals, not conquerors. Learn from them instead of dismissing them. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would be placed under passive observation status, with a single monitoring station to track their development. No contact, no interference, no concern. As the council session ended and representatives began filing out, Thane approached Dr. Vale privately. His expression was cold and certain. "Doctor, I respect your dedication to research, but you're dangerously naive. When these humans inevitably prove to be just another aggressive primitive species, we'll handle them the same way we've handled every other threat to galactic stability, with overwhelming force and permanent solutions." Vale watched the ambassador leave, then turned back to the holographic display still showing the blue world of Earth. In the image, city lights sparkled across the night side of the planet, and two small space stations orbited in the darkness above. "You have no idea what you've just done," he whispered to the empty chamber. 53 years had passed since the Council's decision, and the monitoring station orbiting beyond Pluto had recorded changes that made even the most dismissive Council members nervous. The humans had established permanent colonies on Mars with over 50,000 residents. Their mining operations in the asteroid belt had grown from a few automated probes to massive industrial complexes. Most disturbing of all, they had achieved fusion power and were building ships that could travel between planets in weeks instead of months. Captain Rex reviewed the files one more time as his enforcement fleet approached the Sol system. 12 battle cruisers, each larger than anything the humans had ever built, armed with plasma cannons that could crack moons and protected by energy shields that had never been breached by primitive weapons. The mission was simple: deliver an ultimatum, accept surrender, and establish galactic authority over this upstart species. The human response to their arrival was exactly what Rex expected from primitives who had never encountered superior technology: complete radio silence. No panicked broadcasts, no desperate attempts at communication, no immediate surrender. They were probably hiding behind their planet, hoping the scary aliens would go away. Rex opened communications on all human frequencies and broadcast his message in their primitive mathematical language. "Inhabitants of the Sol system, you are hereby commanded to surrender your colonies and submit to Galactic Council authority. You have 72 hours to comply. Failure to surrender will result in the complete sterilization of your species." Then, Rex waited. Primitive species always responded to ultimatums in predictable ways. They either surrendered immediately out of terror, or they sent frantic messages begging for mercy, or they made laughably defiant threats they had no ability to carry out. But humans did none of these things. For exactly 72 hours, the Sol system remained absolutely silent. No transmissions, no ship movements, no signs of activity from any of the human colonies. It was as if the entire species had simply vanished. Rex began to worry that they had committed mass suicide rather than face conquest. Some primitive species did that when confronted with superior force. It would be disappointing to travel so far only to find empty worlds, but it wouldn't be the first time. Then, at precisely the 72nd hour, every satellite, space station, and communication relay in the Sol system began broadcasting simultaneously. The same message came from Earth, Mars, Europa, the asteroid belt, and installations that Rex's sensors hadn't even detected. Galactic Council Enforcement Fleet, this is Admiral Rivers of the Human Colonial Defense Force. You have made one critical mistake. You told us you were coming. Rex's tactical officer turned to him with confusion written across his scaled features. "Sir, our sensors are detecting massive ship formations emerging from behind Luna's dark side. But that's impossible. Our scouts reported no significant military construction in this system." Before Rex could respond, the human fleet came into view. Ships that defied everything the Council knew about primitive industrial capacity filled the space between Earth and Luna. They were sleek, angular, and absolutely massive. The largest vessel was nearly as long as Rex's flagship and bristled with weapon systems that looked disturbingly familiar. "Sir," his weapons officer called out, "those are our own plasma cannon designs. How did they get Council technology?" Rex stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The humans had built a fleet in complete secrecy, using weapons technology that should have been impossible for them to obtain or understand. But there was something else that made his blood run cold. The human ships weren't just copies of Council designs. They were improvements. The lead human vessel, designated Terra Nova, hailed Rex's flagship directly. "Captain Rex, I presume. This is Admiral Rivers. I suggest we have a conversation before this situation escalates further." Rex activated his personal communicator with growing anger. "Human, you will surrender immediately. Your primitive weapons cannot penetrate our shields, and your industrial capacity cannot match the combined might of the galactic civilizations." Admiral Rivers' voice carried an odd note of what sounded like sympathy. "Captain, did your intelligence briefings mention what humans do when threatened with extinction? You die like every other primitive species that challenged Council authority." "No, Captain, we adapt. We learn. We improve. You've been watching us for 50 years through monitoring stations that we detected, infiltrated, and studied within the first decade. Every piece of technology you've used to spy on us has been reverse-engineered, analyzed, and enhanced. Your plasma weapons, energy shields, faster-than-light communication systems, and propulsion technology are all integrated into our fleet. But we've made some modifications." Rex's tactical displays erupted with warnings. Human ships were moving in formations that violated the basic principles of space combat, accelerating in directions that should have been impossible, and coordinating their movements with precision that suggested real-time communication across vast distances. "You're bluffing," Rex declared, but his voice lacked conviction. The response came not from Admiral Rivers, but from the Terra Nova's weapon systems. A single plasma blast struck Rex's flagship amidships. The shot was perfectly calibrated to disable their main engines without breaching the hull or causing casualties. Rex's own weapons could never have achieved such precision. "Captain," Admiral Rivers said quietly, "that was a demonstration. Our weapons are based on your technology, but they're approximately 40 years more advanced than anything in your fleet. Our shields are adaptive, our targeting systems are quantum-enhanced, and our tactical coordination is managed by artificial intelligence systems that can process battlefield information faster than any biological mind." Rex tried to return fire, but his weapons officer shook his head in confusion. "Sir, their shields aren't blocking our weapons. They're redirecting them. Our plasma blasts are being bent around their ships and dispersed harmlessly into space." The battle that followed was unlike anything in the recorded history of galactic warfare. Rex's 12 battle cruisers found themselves facing human ships that moved like living things, anticipated every tactical decision, and responded to threats with weapons that adapted in real time to counter different attack patterns. Within 6 minutes, 11 of Rex's ships were either destroyed or disabled. His own flagship drifted powerless in space, life support failing, weapons offline. But instead of finishing them off, the human ships simply waited. Admiral Rivers contacted him again. "Captain Rex, we're going to board your ship now. Please instruct your crew not to resist. We have medical teams standing by to treat your wounded." The airlocks sealed as human soldiers moved through Rex's ship with practiced efficiency. They weren't conquerors or executioners. They were researchers. Every piece of Council technology was carefully documented, scanned, and analyzed. Rex watched in horror as portable human computers absorbed the technical specifications of weapons systems that had taken his species centuries to develop. When Admiral Rivers finally entered his bridge, Rex was surprised to see a woman who looked tired rather than triumphant. She was scarred, probably from combat experience, but her eyes held no hatred or cruelty. She looked at Rex with something that might have been pity. "Captain," she said, settling into the chair across from his command station, "I need you to understand something important. We didn't want this fight. We would have preferred peaceful contact, cultural exchange, and mutual cooperation. But you threatened our children. You threatened our future. That was a mistake." Rex found his voice. "How? How did you develop technology that surpasses everything we know?" Admiral Rivers smiled grimly. "Because you gave us 50 years to prepare, and you underestimated what humans can accomplish when we're fighting for survival. Every transmission from your monitoring station was intercepted and decoded. Every piece of technology you used to spy on us was reverse-engineered and improved. Every tactical manual in your computers was studied and countered. Impossible. No species can advance that quickly. Captain, humans have been dealing with superior forces our entire evolutionary history. We survived ice ages, predators, diseases, and natural disasters by doing one thing better than any other species. We learn from everything that tries to kill us. Your council gave us the greatest education in galactic warfare that any species has ever received. You taught us how you fight, how you think, and how you die." Rex stared at her in growing comprehension. "You've been preparing for this specific battle for 50 years. Every battle, Captain. Every possible tactical scenario. Every weakness in Council technology. Every flaw in Council strategy. We've been studying you longer than you've been watching us, and we've been planning for this day since the moment we detected your monitoring station." Admiral Rivers stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the wreckage of the Council fleet. "Captain Rex, I'm going to release you and your surviving crew. You're going to return to the Council and deliver a message. Humanity offers peaceful coexistence with any species willing to treat us as equals. But any future acts of aggression will result in proportional response." Rex's communications officer looked up from his station with barely concealed panic. "Sir, our navigation computers have been altered. They now contain the stellar coordinates of every Council homeworld, military installation, and strategic resource." Admiral Rivers nodded. "We thought that might be useful information to have, just in case the Council decides they want to continue this conversation." As Rex's damaged ship limped toward the edge of the Sol system, he finally understood Dr. Vale's warnings from 50 years ago. Humans weren't just another primitive species with delusions of grandeur. They were something genuinely new in the galaxy, a species that treated every existential threat as a learning opportunity. The message they sent ahead of Rex's arrival was broadcast on all Council frequencies. To the Galactic Council and all member species, humanity extends an offer of peaceful coexistence based on mutual respect and cooperation. However, we are no longer a primitive species. We are no longer defenseless, and we are no longer alone. Any further acts of aggression will be met with decisive response. Choose wisely. Rex's final report to the Council was brief and to the point. Mission failed. Recommend immediate diplomatic contact. Do not, under any circumstances, send another military force to Sol system. They're ready for us. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within hours of receiving Rex's report. But the chamber that had once symbolized order and authority now buzzed with panic and confusion. High Counselor Marin's crystalline form flickered, with unstable light patterns as he tried to process the impossible news. A primitive species had not only defeated a Council enforcement fleet, but had done so using superior technology that shouldn't have existed. Dr. Vale sat in the witness section, no longer the dismissed researcher, but the only expert who had predicted this disaster. His face showed no satisfaction in being proven correct, only deep concern for what would happen next. He had spent years trying to warn them about human adaptability, and now the Council was about to make an even worse mistake. Ambassador Thane paced the chamber floor with barely controlled rage, his scales shifting through colors that indicated extreme agitation. This is impossible. No species develops advanced military technology in 50 years. Rex must have encountered another council species that armed the humans. The avian delegate Kree's feathers were ruffled with anxiety. If humans have council technology, they must have allies among the member species. We should investigate which civilization is secretly supporting them. High Counselor Marin's voice resonated through the chamber with grim authority. Dr. Vale, explain how humans acquired technology that surpasses our own military capabilities. Vale stood slowly, knowing that his next words would determine whether the galaxy faced decades of war or found a path to peace. Honored counselors, humans didn't acquire our technology through alliance or theft. They studied it, understood it, and improved it. This is what I tried to warn you about 50 years ago. Humans don't just adapt to superior forces. They weaponize everything they learn from those forces. Thane stopped pacing and fixed Vale with a venomous stare. You're suggesting that humans are naturally superior to species that have been spacefaring for millennia? No, Ambassador. I'm explaining that humans are evolutionarily specialized for surviving encounters with superior forces. Every other species in the galaxy developed technology through gradual advancement over thousands of years. Humans developed technology through constant crisis response. Their entire civilization is built on rapid adaptation to existential threats. The chamber erupted in angry voices as representatives from 12 species shouted over each other. The mechanical collective's synthetic delegate demanded immediate military action. The Aquatic Union's ambassador suggested fleeing to distant galaxies. The insectoid workers' representative argued for negotiation and surrender. High Counselor Marin raised his crystalline arms for silence. Dr. Vale, you will explain exactly how humans achieved military superiority, and you will recommend immediate countermeasures. Vale activated a holographic display showing the Sol system as it existed now, not 50 years ago. Counselors, look at what humans accomplished while we ignored them. Mars has been transformed into a shipyard complex that rivals our largest military installations. The asteroid belt has been militarized into a defensive network that could stop any fleet from reaching the inner planets. Every moon and planetoid in their system now serves as a fortress. Kree chirped nervously. How is that possible? Our monitoring station would have detected such massive construction projects. Your monitoring station was compromised within 10 years of its installation, Vale replied grimly. Humans didn't just detect it, they infiltrated its communication systems and fed you carefully edited data that hid their real industrial development. Everything you thought you knew about human capabilities was deliberately false information. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. For 40 years, the Council had been making decisions based on intelligence that humans had manipulated. They had no real idea what humanity was capable of, what allies they might have gained, or what their true intentions might be. Thane's voice carried a dangerous edge. Then we destroy them completely. We assemble every ship, every weapon, every soldier from every member species, and we glass their entire system before they can spread to other stars. High Counselor Marin's form pulsed with consideration. Fleet. Admiral Corps will command a force of 200 warships representing all 12 species. This will be a demonstration of power that no primitive species can possibly survive. Dr. Vale stepped forward desperately. Counselors, please reconsider. Humans have had 50 years to prepare for exactly this response. They know how you think, how you fight, and how you make strategic decisions. Sending a larger fleet will only give them access to more technology to study and improve. Enough, Thane declared. Humans are clever primitives, nothing more. Admiral Corps' fleet will end this threat permanently. Fleet Admiral Corps was a veteran of 17 military campaigns and had never lost a single battle. His combined fleet represented the largest military force in galactic history, with ships from every member species equipped with their most advanced weapons and defensive systems. The force that departed for Sol System was meant to be an extinction-level demonstration of Council power. They arrived to find the human solar system transformed beyond recognition. What had once been a simple planetary system now resembled a fortress designed by beings who understood exactly what was coming for them. Mars glowed with the light of thousands of shipyards, orbital platforms, and defensive installations. The asteroid belt had been turned into a maze of weapons platforms that covered every possible approach route. But it was the human fleet that made Kor's blood run cold. Ships that defied every principle of space combat design hung in perfect formations around Earth. They were larger than his flagship, more numerous than his entire fleet, and armed with weapons that his sensors couldn't properly analyze. Admiral, Kor opened communications with growing confidence. Human fleet, you are outgunned and outnumbered. Surrender immediately and your deaths will be swift. The response came from Admiral Rivers, her voice carrying the tired patience of someone who had been expecting this conversation for years. Admiral Kor, I recognize your tactical signature from the Battle of the Broken Moons and your victory at the Crimson Nebula. Your strategic innovations in multi-species fleet coordination are studied in our military academies. It's an honor to meet such a distinguished officer. Kor felt the first stirring of unease. Humans shouldn't know about battles fought before. Their species achieved spaceflight, and they certainly shouldn't have military academies advanced enough to study alien tactical doctrine. You will surrender now, human, or face annihilation. Admiral, we've been monitoring Council communications for decades. We know about your fleet composition, your weapons capabilities, your tactical protocols, and your strategic objectives. We also know about the political pressures that forced you to accept this assignment despite your own reservations about attacking a fortified position with unknown defensive capabilities. Kor's unease became genuine fear. Everything Rivers had said was accurate, including details about the Council's private strategic sessions that should have been impossible for any outside observer to access. How do you know about classified military briefings? Admiral, we've been intercepting and decoding Council communications since we detected your monitoring station. Every tactical manual in your fleet's computers has been studied and countered. Every weapon in your arsenal has been analyzed and rendered obsolete. Every strategic doctrine you've developed over centuries of warfare has been examined and defeated. Admiral Rivers paused, and when she continued, her voice carried genuine regret. Admiral Kor, you're a good soldier following orders from leaders who fundamentally misunderstand what they're facing. I'm going to offer you the same choice we gave Captain Rex. Stand down now, and your fleet can return home with a message about peaceful coexistence. Continue this attack, and we'll demonstrate why threatening human civilization was a mistake. Kor's response was immediate and overwhelming. 200 warships opened fire simultaneously, unleashing enough destructive power to sterilize entire star systems. Plasma beams, quantum torpedoes, gravity bombs, and molecular disruptors filled space with lethal energy that should have vaporized the human fleet instantly. Instead, the human ships seemed to dance between the attacks. Their movements defied physics as they folded space around themselves, appeared in multiple locations simultaneously, and struck back with weapons that Kor recognized as improved, versions of his own fleet's armaments. But it was the precision that terrified him. Human ships didn't just avoid his attacks, they redirected them. Plasma beams meant for human targets were bent through dimensional folds and struck Council ships. Instead, quantum torpedoes were caught in tractor fields, reprogrammed in real time, and sent back to their sources with upgraded warheads. The battle for Sol lasted 3 days, and every hour brought new horrors. Human ships that were destroyed simply phase-shifted out of normal space before the killing blow landed. Council weapons that should have been impossible to counter were neutralized by defensive systems that adapted faster than organic minds could comprehend. On the final day, as Kor's fleet drifted powerless in space, Admiral Rivers contacted him one last time. Admiral, your surviving ships will be allowed to return home. But first, we need to have a conversation about what happens next. The boarding parties that seized control of Council ships were nothing like the savage primitives Core had expected. They were professional soldiers working alongside beings that Core didn't recognize. Tall, insectoid creatures worked beside humans to catalog Council technology. Aquatic beings in environmental suits assisted human engineers in downloading tactical databases. When Admiral Rivers entered Core's bridge, she wasn't alone. Representatives from species that Core had never seen before accompanied her, all wearing insignia that identified them as allies of humanity. "Admiral," Rivers said, settling into a chair with the exhaustion of someone who had been fighting for 3 straight days, "I want you to understand that this was never about conquest or revenge. This was about survival. Your council threatened our children, our future, our right to exist as a free species. We responded appropriately." Core found his voice. "The beings with you, what are they?" "These are representatives from species that your council has been oppressing for centuries. The worker drones you use as slave labor, the aquatic civilizations you've prevented from developing space travel, the synthetic intelligences you've classified as non-sentient property. It turns out that when humans offer alliance instead of domination, many species are eager to cooperate." Admiral Rivers stood and activated a holographic display showing star charts that covered half the galaxy. "Admiral Core, humanity is no longer confined to Sol system. We have allies throughout Council space, and our technology is spreading to every oppressed species that wants freedom. The war you came here to fight is already over. The only question now is whether the Council wants to negotiate a peaceful transition to a more equitable galactic government, or whether you prefer to continue this conflict on a much larger scale." As Core's flagship limped back toward Council space, his communications officer detected transmissions from human fleets already operating deep within territory that should have been impossible for them to reach. The war hadn't just been lost. It had never really begun. Humans had been fighting and winning before the Council even realized they were at war. The message they broadcast across the galaxy was simple. The age of Council domination is ending. The age of galactic cooperation is beginning. Choose your side wisely. The refugee camps scattered across the outer rim of the galaxy buzzed with whispered rumors and desperate hope. Species that had never been allowed to develop spaceflight now found themselves aboard human ships, traveling between stars they had only dreamed of reaching. The liberation fleets had arrived without warning, appearing in systems where oppressed civilizations had suffered under Council rule for generations. Captain Morgan sat in the briefing room of the liberation ship Freedom's Edge, studying tactical displays that showed the insectoid colonies of the Kepler sector. Dr. Vale, now serving as humanity's chief advisor on alien cultures, had identified these worlds as priority targets for liberation. Millions of worker drones lived in slavery under reptilian overseers, forced to mine rare minerals that powered Council technology. "The tactical situation is straightforward," Morgan explained to her mixed-species crew. 17 mining colonies, each defended by a small reptilian garrison. The workers outnumber their overseers by approximately 10,000 to 1, but they've been conditioned to believe resistance is impossible. Her tactical officer, a freed synthetic being called Unit 7, highlighted key installations on the display. "Captain, our intelligence indicates that most colonies have minimal orbital defenses. The reptilians never expected their slaves to receive outside assistance." Morgan nodded, but her expression remained serious. "Remember, this isn't a conquest mission. We're not here to replace one form of domination with another. Our goal is liberation, education, and alliance. The workers get to choose their own future." The Freedom's Edge dropped out of hyperspace above the mining world, designated Kepler 442c, and Morgan immediately understood why the insectoid workers had never attempted rebellion. The planet's surface was scarred by massive excavation operations that stretched from pole to pole. Orbital platforms armed with planetary bombardment weapons hung in space like metal moons, ready to incinerate any signs of uprising. But the human fleet had learned not to fight fair. Instead of engaging the orbital defenses directly, they simply phased their ships through dimensional folds that made them untargetable by conventional weapons. When they materialized inside the defensive perimeter, the brief battle was less a military engagement than a technical demonstration. The reptilian garrison commander's surrender came within minutes of the first shot being fired. Human fleet, this is Commander Scale. We yield. Spare the mining infrastructure and we will evacuate peacefully. Morgan's response was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every worker drone on the planet could hear her words. Commander, Scale, your evacuation is approved. Workers of Kepler 4442c, this is Captain Morgan of the Human Liberation Fleet. You are free. Your overseers have been removed. Your future is now your own to decide. The silence that followed lasted for nearly an hour. Then, from mining tunnels deep beneath the planet's surface, came a sound that made Morgan's crew stop what they were doing and listen in amazement. Millions of insectoid voices raised together in something that their translators couldn't properly interpret. It might have been singing or celebration, or simple disbelief that freedom was actually possible. Unit 7 turned to Morgan with what might have been wonder in his synthetic features. Captain, they're asking if this is real. They want to know if humans truly intend to leave them in control of their own world. Tell them yes, Morgan replied. Tell them that humanity offers partnership, not ownership. Tell them that any species willing to stand against Council tyranny will have our support and protection. The pattern repeated across dozens of worlds. Human liberation fleets appeared without warning in systems where the Council had established puppet governments, slave colonies, or resource extraction operations. But humanity's approach was unlike any conquest the galaxy had ever witnessed. Instead of demanding tribute or establishing occupation governments, humans offered technology, education, and military protection to any species willing to ally with them. More importantly, they offered something that no galactic power had ever provided: the right to say no. On the aquatic world of Oceania Prime, humans arrived to find an intelligent species that had been deliberately kept at pre-industrial levels to prevent them from developing space travel. The human response was to share fusion power technology, advanced materials science, and ship construction techniques. Within months, the first aquatic vessels were joining human fleets as equal partners. In the synthetic processing centers where artificial intelligences were manufactured as property, humans declared all synthetic beings to be sentient individuals with full rights of self-determination. The AI uprising that followed was swift, peaceful, and absolutely devastating to Council logistics networks. But it was humanity's technological adaptation that truly terrified the remaining Council forces. Every liberated world became a research center where human scientists worked alongside alien experts to push the boundaries of what was possible. Insectoid hive mind coordination enhanced human tactical systems. Aquatic pressure resistance technology improved human ship hulls. Synthetic processing power accelerated human innovation beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Dr. Vale stood in the command center of the research vessel New Horizons, watching holographic displays that showed the spread of liberation across the galaxy. What had begun as a human survival response was becoming something unprecedented. A true galactic revolution based on cooperation instead of conquest. The numbers are extraordinary, Vale reported to Admiral Rivers via quantum communication. We've liberated over 200 worlds in the past 6 months. More importantly, we've gained allies with specialized knowledge that enhances our capabilities exponentially. Admiral Rivers' response came from the bridge of Terra Nova, now serving as the flagship of humanity's diplomatic fleet. Dr. Vale, what's the Council's response? They can't be ignoring this expansion. They're not ignoring it, Admiral. They're panicking. Ambassador Thane has convinced the Council to authorize total extinction protocols. They're planning to destroy every world we've touched, every species we've liberated, and every star system. That has aided us. The silence on the communication channel stretched for several seconds. When Rivers spoke again, her voice carried the weight of someone who had hoped for peace but was prepared for total war. "Doctor, how long do we have before they implement these protocols?" "Intelligence suggests they're assembling fleets from reserve forces throughout the galaxy. Every species that remains loyal to the Council is being pressed into service. We estimate they'll be ready to begin systematic extermination within 3 months." Vale paused, studying data streams that showed human fleets moving deeper into Council territory with each passing day. "Admiral, there's something else. Our liberation efforts have revealed the true structure of Council power. The 12 ruling species maintain control through a network of fortress worlds, each one heavily defended and strategically positioned to control entire sectors. You're suggesting we attack their strongholds directly. I'm suggesting that we've already learned everything we need to know about Council military doctrine, technology, and strategic thinking. Our allies have provided us with detailed intelligence about defensive installations that were built over thousands of years. We know their weaknesses." Admiral Rivers' response was immediate. "Doctor, coordinate with all Liberation Fleet commanders. It's time to end this war before the Council can implement genocide as a tactical option." The assault on the Council fortress worlds began simultaneously across 12 different star systems. Human fleets, now augmented with ships crewed by liberated species, struck at the heart of galactic civilization with precision that defied every principle of military strategy. On the crystalline fortress world of Centros Prime, High Counselor Marin watched in horror as human ships phased through planetary shields that had never been breached in 10,000 years of warfare. The weapons they used weren't just advanced, they were impossible. Energy beams that bent space-time itself, torpedoes that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and boarding parties that could walk through solid matter. But it was the restraint that confused him most. Human forces disabled defensive installations without destroying them, captured military personnel without executing them, and carefully preserved civilian populations even while dismantling the government that had oppressed them. When Admiral Rivers materialized on his command platform through some form of teleportation technology that shouldn't have existed, Marin's crystalline form flickered with resignation. "Human Admiral, you have won. We surrender unconditionally." Rivers looked around the crystal chamber where the Council had ruled the galaxy for millennia, her expression thoughtful rather than triumphant. "High Counselor Marin, we don't want your surrender. We want your cooperation. The galaxy is large enough for all of us to coexist peacefully." "Impossible. You cannot maintain control over such a vast territory. The logistics alone will overwhelm your primitive infrastructure." "Counselor, we're not trying to control anything. We're trying to free everything. Every world, every species, every individual gets to choose their own path forward. That includes the 12 ruling species." Marin's form pulsed with confusion. "You're offering us the same choice you've given to our former subjects?" "Exactly. Join the galactic community as equals. Contribute your knowledge and experience to the collective good, and help us build something better than the authoritarian system you've maintained for so long. Or choose isolation on worlds where you can live according to your own values without imposing them on others." The offer was extended to every member of the 12 ruling species. Most chose integration, contributing their advanced technology and administrative experience to the new Galactic Confederation. Those who refused were relocated to comfortable but isolated worlds where they could maintain their traditional societies without the ability to oppress others. Ambassador Thane was among the few who chose exile, his final words to Admiral Rivers carrying more respect than hatred. "Human, you have accomplished something that should have been impossible. You defeated us not through superior force, but through superior ideals. Perhaps that makes you worthy of the responsibility you've accepted." As the last Council stronghold fell, Dr. Vale found himself standing in the same crystal chamber where he had tried to warn the Council about humanity 50 years earlier. The irony wasn't lost on him. The species he had tried to protect the galaxy from had instead saved it from tyranny. "Admiral," he said to Rivers as she surveyed the captured command center, "what happens now? How do you govern a galaxy?" Rivers smiled, and for the first time in years, she looked genuinely at peace. "Dr. Vale, we don't govern it. We help it govern itself. Every world, every species, every individual gets a voice in the decisions that affect them. That's what humans have always believed in, even when we were fighting just to survive. The liberation was complete, but the real work was just beginning. Building a free galaxy would require the same cooperative spirit that had driven humanity to the stars. The Council's age of domination was over. The age of true galactic civilization was about to begin. The galaxy had been transformed in ways that no one could have predicted when the first human ship left Earth's solar system. Trade routes that had been controlled by Council monopolies now carried goods freely between worlds. Species that had been forbidden from developing technology were building cities that reached toward the stars. Most remarkably, former enemies worked side by side to solve problems that had plagued civilization for millennia. Dr. Vale walked through the corridors of Unity Station, the massive space habitat that had been constructed where Centros Station once stood. Unlike the Crystal Palace that had symbolized Council authority, Unity Station was a living community where representatives from hundreds of species lived and worked together. The air hummed with dozens of different languages, and the gentle gravity accommodated beings who had evolved on worlds with vastly different environments. Today marked the first anniversary of the Council's fall, and delegates from across the galaxy had gathered to establish the framework for permanent galactic governance. But the celebration was tempered by sobering reports from the Outer Rim, where some Council loyalists had chosen desperate measures rather than accept the new order. Admiral Rivers stood before the assembly in the Great Hall, her hair now streaked with silver, but her bearing still commanding the respect of beings who had once considered humanity a primitive threat. The speech she was about to give would determine whether the galaxy moved forward together or fractured into countless competing factions. "Fellow citizens of the galaxy," she began, her words translated simultaneously into hundreds of languages. "1 year ago, we stood at the edge of a war that would have consumed everything we held dear. Today, we stand at the beginning of an age where cooperation replaces conquest, where diversity strengthens rather than divides us, and where every voice matters in shaping our common future." The assembly listened in respectful silence, but Rivers could sense the underlying tensions. Liberation had been easier than governance. Some species wanted revenge against their former oppressors. Others feared that human technology would eventually dominate all other civilizations. A few extremist groups still believed that only the strongest species deserved to survive. "The past year has taught us that freedom is not a destination, but a constant choice," Rivers continued. "Every day we must choose cooperation over competition, understanding over prejudice, hope over fear. This is not always easy, but it is always necessary." She activated a holographic display that showed star charts covering the entire galaxy. Green indicators marked worlds that had joined the new confederation willingly. Yellow indicators showed systems that remained neutral but cooperative. Red indicators marked the handful of systems where fighting continued. "We have learned that some individuals and even some entire species are not ready to embrace the principles of equality and mutual respect. The Council loyalists who have retreated to the Outer Rim systems continue to practice slavery, oppression, and territorial conquest. They represent the old way of thinking that nearly destroyed galactic civilization." The red indicators on the display pulsed ominously, representing fortress worlds where the most extremist council members had established independent kingdoms based on the authoritarian principles they refused to abandon. "These holdout systems have made their choice," Rivers said quietly. "They have chosen isolation, aggression, and the belief that some species are inherently superior to others. We cannot force them to change their minds, but we can and will prevent them from imposing their beliefs on others. Unit 7, the synthetic being who had become humanity's ambassador to artificial intelligences throughout the galaxy, approached the podium with data that had been compiled over months of careful observation. Admiral, our intelligence networks have confirmed that the holdout systems are planning coordinated attacks against liberated worlds. They believe that if they can reclaim several strategic planets, other species will lose faith in the Confederation and return to council-style governance. The assembly erupted in angry voices as representatives from recently liberated species expressed their fears about returning to slavery and oppression. The aquatic delegates from Oceania Prime spoke of nightmares about their world being stripped of technology and returned to primitive conditions. The synthetic beings feared being reclassified as property. The insectoid workers worried about their colonies being turned back into mining camps. Rivers raised her hand for silence. Citizens, I understand your concerns, but I want you to remember something important about human nature. We don't fight to conquer. We don't fight for glory or revenge. We fight to protect those who cannot protect themselves. She paused, letting her words sink in. The holdout systems have made their intentions clear. They want to return to the old ways, where the strong dominate the weak, and freedom exists only for those powerful enough to defend it. They have declared war not just on humanity, but on every species that has chosen cooperation over conquest. Dr. Vale stepped forward to address the assembly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had witnessed the transformation of galactic civilization from its earliest stages. Fellow citizens, I have studied the development of countless civilizations across thousands of years. I can tell you with certainty that the choice we face today will determine the future of intelligent life in this galaxy for generations to come. He activated displays showing historical data about species that had faced similar crossroads in their development. Every civilization eventually reaches a point where it must choose between expansion through conquest or growth through cooperation. Those who choose conquest ultimately destroy themselves through endless warfare. Those who choose cooperation create golden ages that last for millennia. The vote was unanimous. The Galactic Confederation would respond to the holdout systems. With the same precision and restraint that had characterized human military operations from the beginning, they would disable aggressive capabilities, liberate oppressed populations, and offer the same choice to everyone: join the community of free worlds or accept permanent isolation. The final campaign began not with massive fleets and overwhelming firepower, but with something the galaxy had never seen before: coordinated humanitarian intervention. Human ships worked alongside vessels crewed by every species in the Confederation, each fleet specializing in the liberation techniques that had proven most effective for specific types of oppression. The aquatic liberation fleets used their environmental adaptation technology to free amphibious species that had been forced to work in hostile atmospheric conditions. The synthetic intelligence networks disabled automated control systems that prevented enslaved workers from organizing resistance. The insectoid hive mind coordination allowed liberation forces to move with perfect synchronization across multiple star systems simultaneously. But it was humanity's gift for turning defensive actions into opportunities for advancement that truly ended the conflict. Every weapon fired at Confederation forces was studied, improved, and integrated into better defensive systems. Every tactical doctrine used by Council loyalists was countered by innovations that spread throughout the Allied fleets in real time. The final battle took place above Terminus Prime, the fortress world where the most extremist Council members had made their last stand. High Admiral Thane, now calling himself Emperor of the True Council, commanded a fleet of ships powered by slave labor and armed with weapons that violated every principle of civilized warfare. His opening transmission was broadcast across the galaxy. Inferior species and their human allies witnessed the return of proper order. The strong will rule, the weak will serve, and the galaxy will be cleansed of the weakness you call cooperation. Admiral Rivers's response was transmitted on the same frequencies, ensuring that every being in the galaxy could hear her words. Emperor Thane, you represent everything that was wrong with the old system. Your reign ends today, but your people will be offered the same choice we've given to everyone else: freedom or isolation. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Thane's fleet fought with desperate brutality, using weapons that targeted civilian populations and tactics that violated every principle of military honor. But the Confederation forces responded with precision that bordered on the miraculous, disabling enemy weapons without destroying ships, neutralizing threats without causing unnecessary casualties. When Thane's flagship was finally boarded, he found himself facing not just Admiral Rivers, but representatives from every species he had spent his life oppressing. Insectoid workers, aquatic intelligences, synthetic beings, and dozens of other species stood together in a display of unity that rendered his supremacist ideology obviously absurd. "Thane," Rivers said quietly, "look around you. Look at what cooperation has accomplished. Look at what your way of thinking has cost the galaxy. This is your last chance to choose a different path." Thane's response was predictable: rage, threats, and refusal to accept that his fundamental beliefs about species hierarchy were wrong. He chose exile on a remote world where he could live according to his principles without the ability to harm others. As the last extremist stronghold fell, Dr. Vale stood once again in a command center watching the transformation of galactic civilization. But this time, instead of monitoring a single primitive species, he was observing the birth of a truly free galaxy, where every world, every species, and every individual had a voice in their collective future. "Admiral," he said to Rivers as they watched peaceful surrender ceremonies taking place across a dozen star systems, "what do you think humanity's role will be in this new galaxy?" Rivers smiled, looking out at stars that no longer burned with the fires of conquest and oppression. "Dr. Vale, I think our role will be the same as it's always been. We'll be the species that refuses to accept that things have to stay the way they've always been. We'll be the ones who believe that impossible problems have undiscovered solutions. And we'll be the ones who remember that the strongest civilizations are built not on the dominance of the few, but on the cooperation of the many." The galaxy was free, not because humanity had conquered it, but because humanity had taught it how to conquer itself. The age of galactic cooperation had begun, and the stars burned bright with the light of civilizations finally free to reach their full potential.